Hello, everybody, you early birds, as we've moved our clock up 1 hour. We welcome you to our Sunday morning roundtable discussion. This morning is Sunday, March 10th, 2019. We are recording from the Plainfield Christian Science Church, Plainfield, New Jersey, the United States of America. And we welcome you all. So glad you're here. And we will start with our morning prayer.
This is Mrs. Eddie's prayer given at the Massachusetts Metaphysical College. And you can find this prayer also in the Green Book, page 171. O my God, I offer as a consecrated gift upon thine altar a heart dedicated to thy service, lips speaking only words of charity, love, and truth. Thoughts striving to be only the true thoughts of the mind of God. Help me to endure unto the end, strong in the faith, powerful in the truth. All the influence that I can bring to bear, all the force of tongue or pen that is mine, I offer in thy service. May heaven help, consecrate, and accept.
Thank you. Mary Baker Eddy, Miscellaneous Writings. We today in this classroom are enough to convert the world if we are of one mind, for then the whole world will feel the influence of this mind, as when the earth was without form, and mind spake, and form appeared. I'm going to start this morning. I wanted to thank Tom. Tom has been finding all kinds of books for us. Also, Francis has sent us some books recently and more books, and Debbie has been sending us books, and then two of you generously offered to pay for the Terry Flynn books. That's the volume of books where he notes all the changes that Mrs. Eddy made in Science and Health, and we now have them sitting beautifully in our bookcase, thanks to some workers yesterday, Shardy, Lil, and Linda. And we also have Bruce and Luann working feverishly to make us more bookcases, which we are so grateful for, because our church now is not only just a church, it's a library. It's always been that, but we're an expanding library. So I thank everyone who has made all of this possible. It's just taken off and growing, and when you come and visit us, you will see all these wonderful books. And I know Jeremy and Linda are going to work on making call them the Terry Flynn books, but these books available eventually on the internet. So all of you, if any of you have an interest in research, all the changes she made, which she says, somewhere I read it, probably in the Blue Book. Everything seems
okay. I bet it's in there somewhere.
Our go-to book.
It's our go-to book, probably somewhere there. Well, somewhere she says how important all these changes are and all the work she did on all the volumes. So while this was going on, Tom found from a book entitled, what was it? It was the David Robinson book. And he has a quote here about the Honorable Charles Evans Hughes, former governor of the New York State, who ran for president for the United States and later became Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. And he summarized the Eustis versus Dickey case. This is the great litigation in 1921. So in researching that, I spoke to my son this morning because I'd given him a biography about this Charles Evans Hughes. And Charles Evans Hughes was actually, he represented the Board of Trustees in the great litigation. And what he says is so beautiful and so logical, and he is also quoted which I'm going to have Gary read from Christian Science after 1910. And it's going to have him read what Charles Evans Hughes said about this case. He understood it completely, and he fought for the Board of Trustees with all his heart, mind, and soul, and he was quite a great thinker of that time, and for all time.
The Board of Trustees of the Publishing.
Of the publishing,
right, of the Independent Publishing Trust that Mrs. Eddy set up for the publication of all of the journal and the paper and everything else, which she intended to be independent of the church, the Board of Directors. So Charles Evans Hughes stated the case for the trustees. A good deal has been said with respect to the importance of harmony. No one could dispute the desirability of harmony. But there are two conceptions of harmony. One is the harmony produced by despotic power. The other is the harmony that results from a unity of ideas and common views of religious truth. It seems to us most unjust to Mrs. Eddy, most contrary to her teachings, to assume for a moment that she relied upon the exercise of the despotic power which these directors have arrogated to themselves. She believed that that truth would have a harmonizing power, that it would bring all those devoted to the truth as she taught it together in a unity of action, not through forms of organization. In fact, it seems to me, and I submit that when, with her knowledge of these directors, and having already constituted them trustees of the real estate under the deed of 1892, she selected another board of trustees under the deed of 1898 for the publishing power. It was because she feared the autocracy that might result if the entire power of organization was in one hand. She feared that when she drafted Article 10, when she invested not the board of directors with the power to declare vacancies, but the first members together with the directors. Whatever may have been said or done later, that was her last word, spoken through her will, which spoke her intent as at the time of her death. She acted, of course, in accordance with the advice given her, but she declared this trust under the law. If the court has not this power to inquire into how the trust is being carried out, and the counsel for the directors had argued that the court did not have this power, then the trust, that which has always appealed so especially to the conscience of a court of equity, has no protection at all. And the power given to save and maintain the trust can be used absolutely to destroy it. End quote.
He operated from the divine mind. It was not in the human mind. He understood what Mrs. Eddy was doing.
And why?
And why. It is very, very clear. And I wanted this read, and I thank Tom for bringing this to our attention again and finding these things so they're not buried forever. And, of course, this is in the Hartford book, but also Tom found it in another book, which we will get for the church. So we don't want this buried. I still get questions. Well, why are we independent? What happened? What's happening to the movement now that all the churches are closing? This is what's happened. It was rank disobedience. It couldn't be clearer. It's no longer a question about it.
History has proven him correct. History has proven Mrs. Eddy correct. The board of directors of the church in Boston have spit all over it.
And argued for it and continued. And even more recently, I I read they put these little things in every which way, including Longyear, saying that the board of directors was right in the great litigation. That was what Mrs. Eddy intended. That is what they are putting forth. So if you don't know any better, that's what you think. But we know better. And let it be said now and here that this is true about our nation and all nations going forward. This idea of huge organizations that take over and control is not according to God's plan. And if you see it anywhere or smell it anywhere, then you vote against it, okay? Because it's not, this is what it will lead to. And please don't go to sleep on this and think, well, everything is fine, or think misinformation. Because what's put out is misinformation. You want to call it fake news? We will call it fake news. It's not the truth. Therefore, we have to be intelligent, thinking beings to prevent this from going in other directions, including our nation and all nations. Freedom, right, liberty. That's why we're having our next magazine on liberty. Freedom to think with God, to worship as you feel right, and not to be
told what to do or how to think.
And Christ Christianity. We've talked about this as well. We have absolute understanding, tolerance, love for all people, because all people are God's people. But systems that are false must fall.
And we should look forward to their fall.
Yes.
So I just want to say, to me, one way to look at it, people ask, about Plainfield and why it's independent, and say, just think through, what is Christian Science? We learn our Christian Science from the textbook. And, we get a lot from centralized organizations, human organizations. So you have to think, is Christian Science the combination of the textbook that Mary Baker Eddy wrote and this centralized human organization? And maybe yes. You need both that human organization that's centralized and controls everything, plus the textbook, or do we just base it on the textbook? Or do we just base it on the human organization? But the only reason I'm at the Plainfield Church is because I look to the textbook only. I didn't look to a centralized human organization.
And here what we have is, it's a spiritual organization, if you will. And the less, everybody's important here. You all have your say, and you all are free to demonstrate and grow in the truth without people telling you what to do. The only time any of us or any of the board members have to intervene if there's some big problem, people not getting along, and occasionally that does happen. And then we follow the principles of the Bible, where we talk to the person, talk to each other.
And if that doesn't work, then a group of people talk to the person. And if that doesn't work, then the whole church talks to the person.
Well, it's the model of the early church, and Mrs. Eddy talked about that. She wants her church to be modeled after the early church,
and
not organization,
exactly.
Early church.
And we expect healing. And if that doesn't work, then God takes care of it for us. In the preface, Mrs. Eddy's textbook, our guide, quote, "The time for thinkers has come. Truth, independent of doctrines and time-honored systems, knocks at the portal of humanity. Contentment with the past and the cold conventionality of materialism are crumbling away. Ignorance of God is no longer the stepping stone to faith. The only guarantee of obedience is a right apprehension of Him whom to know aright is life eternal. Though empires fall, the Lord shall reign forever." Forever. A lot of people ask us, well, how can one little church in Plainfield have such a wonderful website? put out such a plethora of wonderful literature, have all these books and articles and magazines and newsletter and broadcast all these videos. How can a little church do that?
And translations.
Have translations into 9 different languages other than English. How can a little church do that? Well, the little church doesn't do it. God does it. He uses this church, if you want to call it an organization, as sort of the focal point to let people discover what is inside them to do for God. They come here, they offer to do something, and they are allowed to do it, and they demonstrate it, and they fit right in. And if anybody tries to bring the human mind in, well, they naturally feel the rebuke of the divine mind. And it doesn't go anywhere. But that rarely ever happens. People come to this church and their heart is full of desire to do something that they love to do for God. And they're allowed to do it. We have people all over the world contributing to our website, contributing to our services. And when they come to us, God brings them. And we are very grateful because we have no personal agenda. We have no human agenda here. We are here because we love this science and we love mankind. We're so grateful to Mrs. Eddy for giving it to us. We're so grateful for Christ Jesus for what he showed us. And we're grateful to God to be alive, to be happy and healthy, to have that purpose, and to have a purpose for being here. Exactly.
So, are there any questions on this? Otherwise, we'll move on to the watching. Thank you. Thank you all, and thank you, Tom.
Watch number 308.
I'm sorry. I got caught up trying to, so sorry to interrupt, but 100% Mrs. Eddy said that science and health was the authority. And what's really fascinating is that these books like the Construction of the Mother Church with Edward Bates and so on, and even in the We Knew Mary Baker Eddy series, she always said you go back to science and health. And she wasn't even the authority. So if you didn't find it in science and health, which what she said always was in science and health, then that's the authority. And she made that 100% clear. And that article cited from the Blue Book was actually printed in the journal. The 1890 or so edition came out of Science and Health. So she never hid anything. Everything was out in the open. It got printed in the journal. And everything that's coming to light now has been hidden because it points to a completely different direction than where the church has gone to at this point. The Mother Church, that is.
Thank you, Mike.
Yes.
Yes. Because the human mind, the evil wants only to be hidden. Does not want to be brought out to the light of day. Well, we're bringing it out to the light of day for the benefit of all mankind. Freedom
of all mankind. Because once people start to understand this, their whole lives change. As we've said, the snarls begin to unwind, and then they get it, and then everything makes sense instead of being in some clouded existence, gray zone. And the truth works. The truth works on its own. This is the leaven of truth. It just takes off. It starts working. It is working. It always has worked, and it always will. Always been working. But you see, there's something about the science, which is the complete revelation, that has to be unloosed in order for all this good to take place. And it would be animal magnetism that would try to keep it bound and hidden. And then these despotic tendencies, as Mrs. Eddy calls them, would take over and try to limit. And it works in many ways, just as the truth is working in every way. Every 11 of truth is working, as we talked about last week. So this other secret, undetected influence is also working. And that's where our spiritual sense must be fine-tuned so you see it easily. After talking to Florence at the our history course, our Bible study yesterday, I was looking up some things in the Blue Book. That one quote that we mentioned, to quote exactly, these quotes are from the Blue Book, all on page 268. And one was, truth does mighty things when left to its own vitality. Does mighty things when left to its own vitality. All you have to do is leave it alone. It's just like a flower or a plant growing. It just takes off. And then a lie, remember this, a lie has no voice and no audience. Some of these we can use on our watches. So when you're worried about these lies being spread, no, it has no voice and no audience, because if it's not of God, it's powerless. And then, again, what I was speaking, according to your spiritual growth, you will see and hear things. According to your spiritual growth, you will see and hear things.
One of which means you will be able to detect the lie when you hear it and know that it has no voice and no audience.
You see, Charles Evans Hughes, he saw it. Did he know anything about Christian Science? I don't think so. Not specifically, but he had the spiritual sense that saw it, detected it, understood what was going on, while others were blinded to it. And then this, my individual Christ Jesus will go before me and lead me in my work. Isn't that beautiful? You each have your individual Christ Jesus. This is the Christ we talk about, Christ which is throughout all time. And it will lead you in your individual work. So this is what Jeremy was saying. You know, you come here, you find a purpose. And then this individual Christ Jesus enters your heart, mind, and soul, and you begin being led to do things. And the things you would never imagine doing, as you all are, because you're letting this individual Christ Jesus lead you in your work. And then this, disturbed thought needs healing, not nursing. So when someone isn't right, they don't need, oh, you poor dear, and all of this. It needs healing. It needs compassion, yes.
But sometimes compassion is a 2x4 to wake them up.
Sometimes God directs it. But the nursing thing, we were very much taught here about the nursing thought, and that just perpetuates, that enables the error. You don't nurse it. It requires healing, and sometimes that does need clear, forthright speaking. If they don't like it, and if they want to be nursed, well, they'll end up, as Martha Wilcox says, either in a hospital, an insane asylum, or a nursing home. That's a lovely prospect.
But it's their choice. We don't lead them there.
And then the last one, which was the one I was thinking about yesterday. I thank thee, dear Father, that there is nothing between thee and this little child. How beautiful is that? So, nothing between thee and this little child. That is the truth. Nothing can block their understanding of God, their love for God, their growth. Whatever they need, they will find. But know these truths. So, this is in support of Florence Blue Book Roberts.
That's right. That is right.
All of these came from one page, not even the whole page, just part of the page.
Just imagine.
Imagine, yes. Okay.
I think the last quote, though, is relevant for all relationships, too. There's recently I've gotten a lot of disturbing discord in relationships, and I think that's the point. Nothing can come between anybody. It's God there, the love of God among us all. So I think it's a healing truth for relationship discord.
Absolutely. Yes.
Thank you, Florence. That's an invaluable point, because that is how we love divinely. That is how we love as God loves us. To see the truth about everyone as God's own child.
And this leads us into the watching point.
All right, watch number 308. Watch in your efforts to see yourself and others perfect, that you include in the effort to see them seeing you in the same light. This way of working, which was revealed to Gilbert Carpenter when he was living in Mrs. Eddy's home, can be extended without limit until every bit of error is ruled out of the picture. Once, when a patient suffering with consumption came to him, he demonstrated the efficacy of this line of work as follows. He treated this lady for a week. When she was no better, he prayed to know what the trouble was. It came to him to tell her to stop trying to help herself, since her unscientific effort was making the error more real by causing her thought to turn it on herself. He told her to let him tend to that part of the work while she gave herself over to the effort to see everyone around her seeing her perfect. This lady and her sickness were well known in Sharon, Massachusetts, and so her realization had to include the butcher, the baker, the postman, etc., in order to heal the false concept of her that was being held in the minds of those around her. She might well have used Mrs. Eddy's statement, quote, malpractice cannot form a false concept of me in the minds of others, end quote. The result of this cooperative effort was that she was healed in a week. It is important to realize that we are not truly seeing our brother man as perfect unless at the same time we see him seeing us and all as perfect. How could we realize that a man was perfect and believe that he held an imperfect outlook toward anyone? End quote.
That is brilliant of Carpenter, because I think I grew up even in the Sunday school knowing, we have to see everyone correctly. And yet, in the next breath, you're saying, but he doesn't like me. Or So Carpenter brilliantly, divinely sees this as such an important point in your work for yourself. One thing I want to make sure of, because we talk a lot about working for the world, doing our work watches and everything, but I certainly hope you all know you work first thing in the morning for yourself. And if you're not, you have no one but yourself to blame, because I'll hear people, and I've said it myself, I just wasn't working enough for myself. You've got to make sure your own thought is right and clear with God and peaceful. Start with the omnis, the allness of God. All the things you're given, clear your thought, make sure it's peaceful, loving, happy before you go forth to day. Only after that do you go on to help others in the world. Because how in the world can you help others in the world if you or yourself are all screwed up? It doesn't work. So anyway, and we can thank Ray, because she finds these watching points week after week very faithfully, anonymously, quietly, and we're very grateful. Any comments on this? watching point.
It's so logical, and yet you could miss it easily. I mean, how can you say you're seeing someone correctly, and then they are not seeing it correctly? It doesn't make sense even. But anyway.
Yes. Thank you. It's so true. It is so powerful, so right, and yet it is a point you can easily miss, especially if you're all wrapped up in yourself. You've got to see everyone. There's that little poem Carpenter gives. I don't know it. It's in watching points as well, but seeing you correctly and you seeing me correctly and me seeing you, it was back and forth, back and forth. And tell everybody, seeing everybody correctly.
It's a good way to know that, you know, being here doing this good work is not going to get us grief from other people.
Well, yes, and you see, if you don't do this work, you could. This is, what is it?
Expectation.
Yeah, expectation and tying all the knots. I'm getting all my little things. You know, making sure every little part of your treatment is finished, correct. Yeah, and the right expectation that, of course, they're going to love you. Otherwise, you are malpracticing on them. And that leaves a bridge for that malpractice to come racing across the bridge and jump all over you, which no one wants. Pretty soon, you're not seeing them correctly. Well, you're not. So,
hello?
yes.
Hi, I just a comment. I just think that it's this kind of very direct, practical information that I think is kind of lacking in most of what is called Christian Science, and it should be like, there should be like some class, Prayer 101, or some sort of fundamental class that this is added to what was just read, because it's so critically important, and it's something that, as people have just said, has been missed by most people, and it's something that, again, like Plainfield, bringing that out and spreading that to everyone is just really, really important, and just grateful that that's being shared with everyone. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And this
You're
is
welcome.
your class 101.
This is your Science 101.
Yeah.
That's why we do it.
Yeah, I'm not sure you do
Because
get
it's
it
not
anywhere.
being done anywhere.
Yes, you don't have the books to do it with.
Well, and there's a reason for that. Mary started this by talking about the litigation and Judge Hughes' role in defending what Mrs. Eddy established in the first place and the board of directors of the church, totally disobeying it and going in contradiction to it. That litigation in 1920, 21 literally ripped the churches apart, because there were a huge number of members of the church that knew that it was wrong and disapproved of it, and told the board of directors that they were wrong and that they disapproved of it. And they were all excommunicated from their branch churches and from the mother church. So the only people who were left in the organization were people who accepted the human mind, who accepted the compromise, who accepted the error. That is what has been running the organization since 1921. So it should be no surprise to anybody that correct Christian Science is not being taught within that organization. And we now know that that's why God forced us to be independent.
And we got excommunicated.
By our excommunication.
Yeah.
And the people who are finding us are the thinkers, are the independent Christian scientists who love the science spite of the organization. Anyway.
But going back to the new old literature that everybody is finding and sharing here, it really goes back to during Mrs. Eddy's whole battle of presenting Christian Science to the world. I mean, she was fought at every turn. I mean, I always thought that it was in the beginning, and then all of a sudden there was this golden age when it all exploded. But everything, the Mother Church, everything was opposed by somebody at some point, and so it wasn't anything that happened at a certain point. She fought it all the way through.
Yeah, and the fight is against the human mind, against false human beliefs. That's the battle.
Yes.
It's not people.
And it always will be, it always is. And that goes to the forum that, Suzanne and Jeremy wrote about, being conquerors. All the times that Mrs. Eddy mentioned it in Science and Health, what a conqueror is, totally defeating it. And then in the Jeremy's forum, he brings out that the fight is always, it's false belief. Never people or thing or organization. It is false beliefs, yet false systems. False systems or false beliefs that seem to, be...
Perpetuate one another,
yes. But it's still the same thing. And just as David threw the stone and Goliath fell, it's all it takes. We talk about it, that he says how you build it up to knock it down. It has no power because it's not of God. It's just this big mirage that seems to have taken form, but it's still only a mirage, not the truth. And once we are, and I think we're going to end with Parthen's forum on plenish. I would sometimes wonder, why we put out so much every day. I mean, I myself am surprised. Goodness, there's no end to all stuff. All the time, our website, our everything. And I thought, well, maybe it's too much. Maybe we're overwhelming. But after reading this, it's just what Parsons wrote about plenishing. It's God working, and we have to put it out, counteracting all the wrong thought, the negativity, the fear, the doubt. So we will keep pouring it out. I always use that expression, we make hay while the sun shines. The sun is shining, and we'll keep pouring it out. Let it go where it may. Keep supporting its activities. Because all of these are activities, and you think how the audio, especially the YouTube, people are listening and listening and listening, and it's going out on the airwaves to heal and to bless, to purify, cleanse the materiality of the world. It's doing its job, and it isn't any person. This is what I read from the Blue Book about the activity of truth. The activity of truth working. So we will keep on plenishing, because we can do no other, as it said in that forum comment. Did Suzanne or Jeremy want to say anything more about their conquerors?
I'm just grateful to know that God is here with us, with me. What a wonderful thing that is, to have felt perpetually on the outside looking in before, and now to be here and to actually feel like I am a part of it. That's wonderful. Wonderful. More than I ever expected.
I think it's beautiful to think that all these people, Mrs. Eddy herself included, complete reliance on God to help her endure, like she says in that prayer I just gave.
Yeah.
And He did.
He did. Yes.
I think what stood out to me in conquering is the fact that we've got to get up and do something and be active and not passive about Christian Science, because it's when we actually practice and are putting science into action that things happen. Getting out of the prayer chair, so to speak.
Yeah, right. That's right, because that leads to sleep and apathy, which leads to the, oh, yeah, it'll be nice having someone tell us what to do. Oh, yeah, that's a good idea, and I'll just snooze on.
I think putting it in action is why it's not New Age.
Yeah, well, that's true.
New Age just wants flighty.
And what you wrote, too, about the not tolerating, and that's interesting. Mrs. Eddy only uses the word tolerate once. We had heard that when Giuliani was mayor of New York City, he had a no-tolerance policy, and he went after things that were not right. Would not tolerate. He didn't nurse an error. He just went after it, and he cleaned up New York in an amazing way in a relatively short period of time. But I remember reading an article, I don't know if it was by him or just about him, but it was called No Tolerance. And that always impressed me because science is not tolerant of error. You give it an inch, it takes a mile. You cannot be tolerant of it. That doesn't mean you go around bashing everybody and having a machete, but knowing that this truth will annihilate.
You let it do its work.
You let it do its work. But you can't be sympathetic to it or chit-chatty with it.
The one sentence in Science and Health where Mrs. Eddy uses the word tolerate is, truth is ever truthful and can tolerate no error in premise or conclusion.
There you go.
Thank you. There you go.
And it's used in that way. No tolerance for it. And this lesson is all about, as Mike said, it's about the dominion of man and the dominion over fears, the dominion over all things. And exercising this truth operates it, and it works. And what Linda and Florence wrote. Linda, go ahead.
I just was writing that this lesson helped me understand in a better way what it meant to be a law unto yourself. And law means that which is laid, set, or fixed. This is from the 1828 Westers. And it says, you are law unto yourself, saying this and believing it. So the believe part was defined as to be persuaded of the truth of something. So it really helped me think about what I was doing during the day. What was I fixing and believing?
Yeah, it was very good. And you said instead of thinking the wrong thought repeatedly, almost undetected.
Yeah, that was Parsons. I was quoting him.
Yeah, that's right. And then he goes, he pours it forth.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's sort of like what Florence was saying. When you think undetectedly, well, I'm seeing that person right, but that person can't stand me. That's a little undetected error there that's quite, you can't just ignore it and expect, what does Mrs. Eddy say, like in math? You
can't do the formula right 99 times and make one mistake and expect to have the right conclusion. Make one little mistake and you come up with the wrong answer.
So watch what's running through your head. Don't let it go undetected. And then, Florence, would you like to read your lovely quote from the Blue Book, which should also have to watch?
I think it's a very thorough list that Mrs. Eddy makes, and it's on page 266 of the Blue Book. She says that nothing can come to me except that which comes from God, and that is always good. And then she says, I am a law unto myself. There is no ignorant, malicious, willful, superstitious, sympathetic, intentionally directed malpractice from theosophy, palmistry, phrenology, occultism, witchcraft, necromancy, black or white magic, spiritualism, animal magnetism, hypnotism, mental science, free love, malpractitioners, trustees, directors, laymen, occultists, materia medica, or from Roman Catholicism, neighbors, friends, enemies, acquaintances, or relatives that can mesmerize me or influence me or confuse my spiritual continuity or interfere with my spiritual work or cloud my vision, mental, or darken my consciousness. Neither can it impede my progress in my true understanding of God. I think that got it all there. I mean, wonderful, I feel.
It is. It is. Boy, she included everything.
Everything. Mm-hmm.
Everything. So, and we must too. And if you probably, in going over this list, a few little bings went off. Whoops, bing, bing. I think that thing is bothering me, or bing, bing, bing.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, to even include acquaintances, relatives, it's just such a thorough list, really.
Oh, and especially relatives, right?
Right.
yeah, sometimes especially.
What did Jesus say? Those who are worst, something, I'm not sure what the wording was, but he warned us, especially those of your own household.
And, that was what Rich Carey used to always say, those nearest and dearest.
Are the ones that'll be used.
Yeah, that can try to flip you over.
Get you, yeah.
Because you love them, or you think it is real, or it sounds plausible. Some way it tries to flip you over. And remember, we are to say daily, we should probably put this in our full text. Christian Scientists, be a law unto yourself. That what? Mental malpractice.
But
whether you're
sleep or awake.
Yes. We're to do that often. These are not suggestions. Mrs. Eddy is telling us to do this for a reason, and that's what this forum was about. And
I like where she said, sorry.
No, well, go ahead.
No, I like how she concludes it with impede my progress in my true understanding of God. Because it's the wrong understanding of God that I feel, this only science makes it clear what God is. And this wrong understanding, I feel, is making people not come under his control and direction, which, for example, as he does with this church, he would do with everyone if we understood God correctly. And so,
thank you.
That's a wonderful point. It is the incorrect it is the ignorance of God that drives people to worship so many other different gods, right?
Now, Frances gave me this little book written by Mary Pickford. Anyway, she talks about how as a child she used to sit and just say, I hate God, I hate God, I hate God. And how she had to get over this. But goodness, we meet people who feel that way because they think God is the reason that the world is a mess, or why someone died, or who knows what else, as we've talked about. But in science, we learn this is absolutely not true. God loves us. It's the lack of God, not God, that causes troubles. Our church sign says God does not punish, he reforms. That is beautiful, and that is very important. Now, my goodness, I had so much more to go over, and another week's gone by, another lesson's been read. So, and this is where, please, our forum does come in. Thank you for those who do write on the forum and share your ideas there, since we can't get to everything, and I appreciate there's many things more I was going to go over. But we will end now with Parthen's forum about plenishing.
The verb to plenish, no longer in use today, is derived from the Latin plenus, full, filled, greatly crowded, stout, pregnant, abundant, abounding, complete, from which words like plenty, plentiful, plenitude, and replenish are derived. Any assembly with full attendance, such as the UN General Assembly, is called a plenum. A plenary school assembly denotes full attendance of all students and faculty. Christ was brought to earth by a remnant of followers of God who were so fully present with God that God was with them, along with all the hosts of heaven in plenary attendance. In one accord with allness, this remnant was able to replenish a Christ-depleted earth, drowning in materialism. By a new and living way, they ushered in the Christ, and so began the Christian era. In Genesis 1:28, replenishment is not simply filling up depleted space and stopping there, but is an energetic, ever-happening endeavor, bestowing blessings upon earth that are constantly begetting more, each one increasing in blessedness. Think of Mrs. Eddy publishing the Christian Science Monitor with greater energy than that of a girl 70 Earth years younger than she. In other words, replenishing the earth is God's omni-activity, operating through lives dedicated to Him in full, uninterrupted surrender. Replenishment is what Jesus meant by life and life more abundantly, and which He demonstrated by healing great multitudes of people in an afternoon, the multiplication of the loaves and fishes, etc. This is also how God blessed His creation on the seventh day, not calling it merely good, as on previous days, but very good, heavenly good that is bristling with activity, constantly replenishing those that are replenishing the earth with it. Replenishing the earth is my assignment. Quote, God rests in action, end quote. Science and Health, page 519. Therefore, God grant that I may enter into His rest, to manifest the light of His day every moment of my life, and like a wise virgin, replenish a light-famished world by seeing it filled to overflowing with the radiance of the Christ. Seeing the world right side up turns its evils upside down, so that every space, every corner that darkness once claimed as exclusively its own is refreshed, restored, renewed, replenished, with the light of eternal noon, unmarked by a setting sun. Science and Health, first edition.
Beautiful. That's to go in our Liberator. So, yes. So, dear Parsons, that's good, yes. So
Thank you all.
Thank you. Go forth replenishing our earth. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.